What is up, you radical human? Today in the studio, I had my brother, Eben Britton, the gentle giant, the man of wisdom, former NFL player turned truth seeker, yogi, just a radical human. Many rabbit holes today. We talk about the current state of the spiritual community, some of the drama that's going on over there with polygamy and radical monogamy, how spiritual leaders can sometimes get a guru complex and mislead people. We talked about how he hit rock bottom and how that forced him to really find God and why you might want to go on a journey like that for yourself. We talk about what's going on in the space, Texas banning weed and gummies and Delta 8 and how people are abusing substances to really check out from themselves and numb instead of using these substances to go inwards and find themselves. We talk about healing, health, the sugar diet, and anything that's topical in the land of health. So let's get into it with Mr. Eben Britton. We're back. Eben, it's been almost exactly a year since we did the first episode. And so this is number 2 of hopefully many, many more. We'll just keep doing this and talking about the beauty and the chaos and the madness and the funny things along the way. So big call to action for the listener firstly. If you want to go back and listen to episode 1 with Eben, I'd highly recommend it. But for those that are new to you, new to the show, give us a little bit of the high-level backstory. NFL turned yogi, awakening, the whole gamut. Go where it takes you.
Yeah, man. Also, dude, anytime. Just shoot me a text, bro. I'm here.
Yeah.
I loved our last convo. Super fun. Totally resonate with you. You know, feel like we're soul brothers riding the same wave.
Heck yeah.
You know. Yeah, so little high-level backstory for y'all. Played in the NFL, had the vision when I was about 8 years old. I want to play in the NFL. That's what I want to do when I grow up. I was at my grandparents' house in Connecticut watching the summer news one morning, and they had clips of the Jets and the Giants in training camp and just fell in love with these gladiators and said, that's what I want to do when I grow up. Mom would never let me play. Finally, my freshman year of high school, convinced her to let me play. From the moment I stepped on the field, it was just like a rocket ship to the moon. You know, everything I did, how I lived, how I breathed, how I ate, how I trained, how I carried myself was all in alignment with achieving this dream of playing in the NFL. And I did it. First, I went to the University of Arizona, full football scholarship. Was there for 4 years, redshirted my freshman year, started the next 3 years, team captain, All-American, All-Pac-10 honors, All-Pac-10. Pac-10, rest in peace, no longer exists. For you football fans, that's a funny evolution of the sport. A lot has gone down in college football. We'll save that for another conversation. But went to the NFL, was drafted by the Jaguars, 39th overall in the 2009 draft. Played offensive tackle, had a fantastic rookie season. The rest of my career was pretty marred by some intense injuries. Dislocated my shoulder multiple times, had to have shoulder surgery, ruptured disc in my back, had to have back surgery, grounded out for another 5 years after that rookie year, so played 6 seasons in the NFL. Really left the game on my own terms, felt like I gave everything I had to it and didn't have anything else to give. Came out of football, and here it is, like, now what? What do I do next? And my wife at the time, now my ex-wife, God bless her, she said, well, now it's time to write your book. Started working on a book proposal about life in the trenches. Got a lot of good feedback from publishers, but wasn't quite what they were looking for. Maybe not red carpet story enough, or not nitty and gritty enough. But that turned into an article that I published with Sports Illustrated called What Does It Take to Stay in the NFL, where I talked about dealing with injuries, dealing with depression, pills, substances, cannabis, Adderall, all sorts of stuff. And that was really the launch pad for me into life after football in this through line that's continued today, which is basically just being a truth sayer, telling my story as it is, like it is, with the intent of showing people what's possible. We all go through immense amounts of adversity, and through that darkness, no matter how difficult it may feel, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And if you're willing to take the steps, put one foot in front of the other over and over again, you can find your way out of that darkness. And for me, that journey came with, while it was very difficult, I came out of my football career totally shattered, mentally, emotionally, physically. And had to go on this long, arduous journey of putting myself back together again. And that started with my body, got lost, 70, 80 pounds.
Damn.
Went from about 325 to 255. A lot of that, experimenting with diets, did a lot of ketogenic, then moved into carnivore. I think we talked a little bit about that last time. But, food has always been a vital component of my journey. And as an athlete, I feel really grateful for that on the ground experience of, learning and understanding how to take care of my body through movement and food, first and foremost. And then from there, when I got my body right, I realized that my mind was a fucking mess. There was still a lot of chaos. I was still hitting a lot of escape valves, whether it was porn or weed or alcohol or whatever I could get my hands on to escape the moment. And eventually all those escape valves stopped working, and I had to go, okay, I really need some help here. Found myself into the 12-step program, Al-Anon, specifically a men's group in the Hollywood Hills, which was, kind of my initial awakening. It was an initiation for sure into understanding this matrix that I'd been living through. First meeting I ever went to, I walked in there just in a cloak of shame and darkness. It was like a black cloud was wrapped around me. Felt like I hadn't been able to take a deep breath in maybe my entire life. First guy, the lead share, starts talking about his childhood, and it sounded like he was talking about my childhood, and in that moment, it was like the clouds parted, the sun beamed through, and for the first time, I was able to breathe and see the light and felt some hope. And it started this thing, this journey that I've been on, which has led me into lots of therapy, plant medicine. I got connected with two vitally important mentors, a couple of men that were able to really point me in the right direction over and over again. And that led to meditation, led me back to yoga. And, slowly but surely reconciled all those parts of myself that I didn't like so much, learned how to have acceptance and allowance and compassion for all of that. And that's continued. I mean, even since we last talked, and it continues today, and
never ends, bro.
Yeah, never ends. That's the beauty of the ride. It never ends. There's always something there's always a layer to peel back. There's always something that we can get underneath, a story to dissolve, some old belief that's no longer serving us that we can let go of. And so here we are, man. Life after football has been an incredibly interesting ride. And like you said, found myself in yoga. I teach a lot of yoga, teach a lot of breath work and meditation. These things have been vital in my growth and evolution over the last 7 or 8 years. And like I said, it just continues to this day, man. And it gets more and more interesting as we go along.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, if you peel enough layers of the onion, the tears come and the fuzzy eyes, and you keep going. It never ends, this one. It never ends.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, you've leaned on so many tools and different things you mentioned there, which have been very instrumental for me too. Yoga, meditation, plant medicine. What's happening culturally, which is very interesting, is a real big resurgence back to traditional secular religion, Christianity and things like that. And sometimes that means that people throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to things like yoga, because they'll call them worshiping false idols, or it's new age.
Devil worship.
Yeah, it's the devil worship. And you're not shy of throwing around your spirituality, your connection to God. You will use that word, but it seems like you're also open to finding your own path to God. How does one go about doing that? And how do you deal sometimes with a little bit of the pushback of, people that claim to own God and say that there is only one way to God? And if you do crystals or plant medicine, you're meddling in, nasty spirits, and you're essentially gonna, I guess, burn in hell, for want of a better word.
I think it's all in, again, however you get there, great. First and foremost, I think, whether it's through religious orthodoxy or some more perceived alternative method, at the end of the day, God is all around. God is all within us and without us. And that has not been a linear path for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think it's interesting. I'm interested in the idea that the only salvation comes through Jesus, because I hear that comment a lot.
A lot, yeah.
I just like somebody to explain it to me.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Give your life over to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Explain it to me. I'm interested in it. Not from I don't believe it, but I'm actually truly interested and curious about that idea, that philosophy. And I think it's great. I think that's great. I love Jesus. I love the idea of Christ consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the stories of Jesus in the Bible have been massively influential
mm-hmm.
for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting you bring that up, dude, because last night I host a men's group Wednesday nights, which actually I'd love to have you come and
mm-hmm.
speak at.
Yeah.
It's on Zoom. It's a bunch of guys from around the world, actually. We've got some Aussies. We've got guys all over the country. And this came up because one of the older gentlemen who has a son who's about my daughter's age, probably is like 12, 13. He was talking to a friend of his who has some older boys who are maybe 16, 17. And they were talking about this interesting movement in young men going into faith,
mm-hmm.
specifically Christianity, because they feel like that's where there's some stability, there's some connection, especially with women in the Christian community, that resonates on a more authentic level to
yes.
what they're looking for or wanting. And he was like, I'm a little worried about it. And I thought, I think this is just part of the process. We've gone through a lot of interesting cultural movements over the last 100 years, that have been, while, you can say whatever you want, the feminist movement was vitally important in empowering women to be sovereign beings who could strive for their highest potential in a world that has been incredibly oppressive
mm-hmm.
to women. That's just a historical fact.
Yeah.
I mean, women were burned at the stake under the guise of being witches, but really they were just expressing their intuition, and their divine gifts as women, essentially. And, I think it's been incredibly important leading us to this place where we're seeing, in my view, today, a really profound awakening of the divine masculine, of men having an opportunity to show up in the truth of manhood beyond the old paradigm that got us to a certain level that needed to happen. We came out of the hunter-gatherer mode where men were essentially the hunters and the protectors. And we were plunged into a civilization, a modern civilization of modernity, where that wasn't necessary anymore. And that got really, that dynamic, especially for us as men in the household, got really distorted because we didn't have the fulfillment of bringing home the kill. While we could be the providers and go to the 9-to-5 job, you think of the era of Mad Men, these post-war men who fucking went and did something that had to be done, fought the Nazis and, fought fascism and came home to a life that probably didn't feel so comfortable and that they had no idea how to operate in other than to go and bring home the bacon. In any way, shape, form that felt intuitive to them. And, that caused a lot of disruption in the family unit, a lot of disconnection from the father in the family unit. And I think that in the last, 10, 15 years, and I think it's just starting to it's really starting to just gain that energy and momentum in the direction that is needed in the world right now, where men are starting to tap into more of that feminine, intuitive sense, where we can have emotional intimacy with our partners and our families, which I think women have been dying for, and also be the warrior. Because we can't lose that. For me, that's been such a massive part of my process as well. I think even since we last talked, allowing myself to recognize and honor the warrior inside of me and bring that into the fold with the poet Yogi. For a long time, when I started on this, when I came out of football, even in the last month, honestly, I've had a really interesting, because I've been doing this workshop with one of my mentors, and it's a prosperity workshop. It's sort of like a spiritual money workshop. It's looking at your relationship with money, your relationship really with prosperity through a spiritual lens. And a lot of it this past month has been all about the stories that we carry around. And for me, we have to do part of the work is doing a daily, twice a day, I am statement prayer. And in that prayer at the end, we declare our want. Like, what do you want in your life? And as it's sort of financially oriented, that want starts off as, how much money do you want in your bank account this month? And for me, it was interesting because having played in the NFL, I made a lot of money. At 21 years old, I got a check for a lot of money that most of my family had never seen before in their entire lives. As a 21-year-old kid, what do you do with a lot of money? 21-year-old maniac.
Maniacs.
It's like first-class flights, it's strip clubs, it's, bottle service at the club.
Young, dumb, and full of cum with $1 million. That's a lethal combo, bro.
Yeah, dude. And so I left the NFL with just enough money to buy a home, and that was about it, and about a year cushion until I had to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so my relationship with money has been really an interesting one throughout my life. And to the point where, through my spiritual work, I dissolved a lot of this material wanting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that being said, and at some point we can segue this into the spiritual community, if you want to participate in the world as it is today, we got to have money to pay bills. There's just no way around it.
Yeah.
Like whatever you want to do, unless you're this guy, this interesting guy, I think his name's Rob Greenfield. Have you seen him?
No.
He's like totally cut ties with all material possessions. He sleeps in the park in a sleeping bag. He owns nothing. He's got nothing. He's a really interesting guy, and he talks about a lot of interesting stuff. Not for me,
Right.
Yeah. I want to have a home. I want to have a nice bed to sleep in.
I don't know if my kids would like that.
Yeah.
I'm saying, all right, kids,
Yeah.
we're renouncing all material desires. Let's go sleep in the park.
Yeah, it's a really interesting experiment that he's doing, and I recognize, like, not for me in this life. And so we got to be able to make money, right? And I think that on the spiritual journey, the deeper you go, the more you recognize what's truly important to you. And material possessions, you come to see, like, you could have it all. You could have the house and the car and the beautiful family, and none of that stuff really makes you whole. As much as we want to attempt to have that happen, it's just we see it all the time. I mean, suicide has been a really interesting kind of background thread in my men's group, and people that I know, talking about people who seemingly had it all,
Yes.
who committed suicide, men
Yeah.
in particular. And so you go, wow, at some point you recognize that the material stuff doesn't really matter that much. However, it's necessary. We understand the necessity of making money and being able to pay bills and taxes, and being able to experience true freedom in this lifetime requires having the resources to do that,
Mm-hmm.
So for me, in this work, I had to connect with this fire that I had lost touch with, that never left, but I lost touch with it. This fire of, like, why am I getting up in the morning? Like, what is getting me up in the morning? What am I fucking fired up about? And I started off, I'm like, I want $5,000 in my bank account. And I realized, saying it and working it out in this group, I was like, I have no emotional connection to that,
Mm-hmm.
But then I was in meditation, and what came to me was, what fires me up? Like, where do I feel this fire in my balls, dude? Like this deep connection with money and prosperity. And what came up was, I want all the fucking money in the world, And I shared that with my mentor, and he laughed, and he's like, that's great, Eb. I love that. But what does that mean for the rest of us? We have to, like, come and suck your dick to get something, And I laugh, and I thought, oh, that's funny. That's a funny thought. Well, it might not be too bad, but but what I said to him was, I felt so unattached to money, and I had to bring it all the way to the other end of the spectrum to find that fire. And I did through that. And that's definitely refined, that desire. That's been refined and fine-tuned over the course of the last few months. But then I was talking to a guy who was assigned to me as sort of a guide through it, who's a graduate of this program. And he said to me, Eb, when I heard you say that, I felt this primal fire. And he's like, whatever we're doing here, whatever we're doing in this work, we've got to anchor into that, because that is the seed of who you are when you came into this body in this world. And I thought about that a lot. I contemplated, I just sat with it in my body and I felt it. I felt that energy that was behind those words. And what came up was, I'm the fucking conqueror. Like that is, because that's what anytime, I think I said this on the last podcast as well, you know, anytime I thought about what my football career was about, I wanted to conquer the world. I wanted to show the world how big and fucking scary and tough I was. And so it really linked this thing for me that I had lost, because coming out of football, I thought, I can't be the conqueror, dude.
Mm-hmm.
I can't be that scary warrior, that Viking warlord that lives in me. I have to detach myself. I have to kill. I have to bury that aspect of myself, because that guy causes a lot of pain and destruction. But doing this work, I realized, man, that's so vital to my life force energy of who I am in this lifetime and what I have to give to the world. And I was in the sauna and I was thinking about it, and I thought, you know, the conqueror, being the conqueror is not about having anything at all. It's about walking with a certain energy. It's about living with a certain fire.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and my point with all of this is, it's been really an interesting journey in bringing that into everything I do, and how it's filled in the cracks of, you know, the teaching that I've been doing for years now, and bringing this vitality to it that was missing. And all men, you know, we've gone through this attempted cultural castration.
Mm-hmm.
And part of us reclaiming the truth of our masculinity has to do with us claiming for ourselves that we are the warrior too. And you can be the warrior in love, in compassion, and that fire illuminates everything else that you want to be in this world. Mm-hmm. And what the world really needs right now. You know, and yesterday I did a podcast with this guy, John. He's known as the Angry Therapist on Instagram. Great dude. Had a fucking great conversation. And he said to me, he's like, Eb, you know, what drew me to you was, you're a guy that I can chest bump in the locker room. We can talk about sports. We could talk about lifting weights, but then we can go really deep.
Yeah.
And he's like, the world needs that right now. And I've been in this place, man, where, you know, talking about all the stuff going on, the commercialization of spirituality and wellness and all this stuff, like we can't, again, to your comment earlier, how many ways can we say eat real food, move your body, manage your stress, you know? And I felt over the last couple years this descent into, especially with my own podcast, going, I don't have anything left to say, you know? But with this new energy, and him saying that yesterday, and it was so simple, you know, it was just such a simple description of who I am, you know, that rang so true. And I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe it's time to get back on the mic, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I don't know if any of that made sense, other than we're in a moment where men are being called to expand themselves and bring the balance of the feminine with their masculinity. And when those two merge, I think we're going to see something really beautiful come.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think that does make sense, in particular too, because you're evoking the lost archetype that a lot of men have lost, which is this warrior. And to your point, when you walked away from the NFL and you feel like, you know, you have to expel that from you, you actually can't. You can't get rid of it. It lays dormant, and actually it will come out in the shadows in other ways.
Yes.
It will get like a very shadowy energy. So you have to actualize that. And I think a lot of men probably struggle with this idea that they can't be the warrior, conqueror, king, because there's always a bigger badass. There's always a guy with a nicer car or a nicer boat. But it's not necessarily about the game of comparison. It's about actualizing your seed of potential. It's about like mastering and conquering in your little kingdom, being the provider for your family, for your local communities, and for yourself first and foremost. Because like you said too, and I've had clients and I've seen this with so many people that have all of the material wealth, but there's darkness that's there because the real belonging that people are looking for is an inside-out job. It can't be fixed by things. You can never get enough of what almost works. So, you get the watch, the car, the money, and then you're just left chasing the next high, and it just never quite scratches that itch. So this is all about that piece that you mentioned that comes from expressing your full range. You know, the full range. That's the word that I think when I hear you describe what the therapist said to you, which is like a man's man that I can like bump fists with and compete with in the gym, and then a brother that I can go deep and talk about existential and God and love and even open up and be emotional, because that's what is coming more accepted in the zeitgeist of what's acceptable for a man. Not even maybe acceptable, but what's encouraged for the modern man now is to be so strong that you can be soft. That you can choose it.
Yeah.
Not that you're bleeding on people that didn't cut you, but you have that warrior strength and such capacity and range that when it is required to open up the vulnerability, to be a bit soft, whether that's with a lover or whether that's with a brother, that you can do it. And and that is what people are craving. And that's probably why I think maybe even just internally you got the call to like, let's get back on the mic, because it is needed. Because as much as I think you're right, we're in a very interesting moment where men can and should be stepping into that. We still need examples of it. We need examples of it. We need people to call us up and into that being. Otherwise we will stay castrated. We will stay as this weird pseudo man that's lost his myth and doesn't know what the fuck to do in life, unless people are on the mic saying like, hey, you can be both. You can be the magician and the lover, but you can be the savage. You can be the beast. You can want to get after it. You can want to conquer. And that doesn't mean conquering other men. It means conquering yourself, this mastery, and tapping into that, which I think is very primal and very real. And we shouldn't ignore it.
Absolutely, man. We can't. We've ignored it long enough, And 100%, 100%, everything you said. And, it's a very interesting time, dude. It's a very interesting time. I think that, again, to your point, we've been frightened of our inner warrior because we feel like that's a bad thing. We feel like we're going to hurt people.
And because historically it has been bad sometimes. That energy has been used to do atrocious things.
Yeah.
So it's like we throw all the baby out with the bathwater and say we can't even tap into that energy because it could get nasty.
Yeah.
But that's the shadow. It's not the divine expression of that.
Exactly.
Right? It's not the controlled expression of that.
Exactly. And when you don't allow that to breathe, like you said, that the shadow aspect of it expresses itself in some way, dude.
In some way.
It's going to be in the bottle. It's going to be in the women. It's going to be in something. It's going to find a way.
Yeah.
Because it has to be acknowledged,
yes.
So you either have the choice of bringing it into the light and using it as this divine resource that lives in you, or you can continue to shun it, shame it, and bury it and have it express itself in all sorts of strange ways.
Yes. And for men, I mean, I think disproportionately deal with problems of addiction. Yeah. And there's no endless forms of easy addiction now in the modern world, whether you want to talk about pornography or even medicines that have been commercialized to the point where they're drugs now. You can get gas station weed and Delta 8 and mushroom gummies at a store. Like, these are sacred medicines that people are now being told, because they've got the label of medicine. Well, I can take this to heal, but they're doing it with the intention of trying to like block out the shadow stuff, not really facing themselves. And that might as well just be any other drug. What's your take on all of that? Like the access to things that can be medicinal, but have been enculturated and used very much in a misaligned way.
Yeah. Well, it's an escape, It's just you have to I talk to guys all the time, whether it's a one-on-one client or guys in passing, who are struggling with all sorts of things. And I wish I could say, take this pill, do this thing. Here's a step-by-step process, dude. It's such an intimate, subtle practice, of learning how to be with yourself, learning how to be with all the aspects of yourself, the part of you that's tired, the part of you that doesn't feel good enough. Like, that's okay, man. We all have that. And again, with social media and the monster of spiritual marketing and wellness marketing through various influencers who I think all mean well and are, spreading a lot of good information. There has inevitably been this cultivation of an idea that you've got to be perfect. You've got to be David Goggins running through the wall, even when your legs are broken.
Yeah.
And, if you don't have the energy today to do that, that's okay. That's part of the process too. And only until you're willing to sit with that can you actually get to the bottom of what's going on here that I need to address in myself. Another thing I want to say is, I think processing information. And what I mean by information is, past experiences, traumas, wounds, difficult memories, experiences. Processing can be very fruitful until it's not, until it just becomes something that you're holding over yourself. And, we're this super interesting being, humans. We've got this God consciousness in this animal form. And with that, we can go as far back into the past for as long as we want. We can go way out into the future for as long as we want. And none of that really helps us in the here and now.
No.
So if we can practice always just coming back to now, I'm a deep thinker and I'm super sensitive. I love to think about that thing that happened 10 years ago, 30 years ago when I was 7. I love to think about, it's one of the things that I love dearly. I love to fantasize. I love to try to figure out why things happened or what was going on in that moment when this thing occurred. And it's been helpful to an extent, but eventually I've gotten to the point where I can go down these rabbit holes for as long as I want and feel all sorts of icky, intense feelings that I then have to unravel myself from over a course of however many hours, days, whatever it takes. Or I can acknowledge all that stuff and go, yeah, that happened. No doubt about it. But once the understanding has been brought to a certain situation, we just have to continue practicing coming back to this moment here, because right now this is totally perfect moment. Sitting here, we're safe, we're having a great conversation, we're having fun, and you can do that all the time, Just coming back to this moment right here, right now. And as a good friend of mine said over the weekend, he said, we've got to learn how to be vertical, live vertically. It's here and now. It's us and God. It's us and spirit constantly. It's just right here, right now. Everything else is an illusion. And right now is a totally perfect moment. And it just is. And if we can get really good with that, being with what is here and now, and you've got an opportunity to do something really special with your life, And that's hard. I was talking to yesterday on the pod, talking with him about that. He's like, well, how do we do that, man? We've got taxes and bills and responsibilities and all this stuff. And, I said, not in this lifetime at least, but I'm not interested in being a monk in a temple chanting and meditating all day long. I feel like I've got work to do. I want to be in relationships. I want to have love. I want to have a family. I want to build a business. I want to make money. I want to create my empire. I want to do all that stuff. That feels really fun and exciting. So if I'm choosing to do that, how can I bring myself, mind, body, spirit, into harmony in the midst of all the chaos, all the stuff that's going on perpetually, and become a master of that, conquer that, And that's my practice these days, man, is just constantly coming back to the moment over and over again, because I know that I can slip into the past, I can slip into the future so easily and ruminate on all sorts of things and try to unpack and figure out and fix things that, dude, it's so, I was thinking about this the other day, which kind of prompted this, this new practice of coming back to the moment over and over again, which was essentially a reminder, because I've done it 1,000 times before.
Yeah.
I was thinking about how heartbreaking it is to be a human being. It's so, like, we experience so much pain. There's so much pain, like, all over the place, as a child, in your parents, as a father, and your children, and thinking about, like, oh, what I could have done different, or how it could have gone if this, and, it's all so, you can't even touch it. Like, to describe it as ephemeral isn't even quite accurate, because there was nothing tangible to begin with. It's a dream. It's a dream that never even happened, really, but it lives in here somewhere in the grand scheme of the cosmos and consciousness. And so how do we reconcile that as a human being who's doing the best they can in this moment, here and now? We've got to cultivate presence and being present. And it's maybe the biggest task that we have.
I would agree, man. I would agree.
And, in that, the warrior that wants to swing the battle axe through the masses, through the horde, looking at the state of spirituality and wellness, and it's like, oh, well, sun your butthole, and, put this crystal on your heart, and do ice tubs, and do ayahuasca, and all this stuff is so great. And I think I've talked about this before. It's all great. All of these things are great tools for enlivening us, for bringing balance and greater harmony into our nervous system, and all these things. But if you're not showing up with deep presence in all of your relationships and your life, none of it fucking matters, dude.
No.
And talking about, food and diet, this funny thought always comes into my mind, and it did last night, talking about food. And it was funny you brought up the sugar diet. That to me is like, oh, these guys are doing a liver cleanse, and, there's an old lady in Mississippi somewhere who smokes 3 packs of cigarettes a day and drinks Diet Coke and is 100 years old. Are we going to start branding that diet? The cigs and Coke diet?
The ciggy and Coke diet.
Live to 100, bro. But it's like, no, we're not going to do that, because that would be hilarious and seemingly absurd to just about everybody, but somehow it works for her.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And so finding what works for you, and going back to the idea of God, man, God is in here all the time. This is all God happening right now. Every thought that I think is an amelioration, an expression of God. Can I listen to that? Can I listen to when I'm feeling tired? There's lines in the Bible talking about when I'm tired, he lays me down. Learning how to rest. it's been vitally important for me on my journey, so that I stop fucking running around like a chicken with its head cut off, just trying to validate myself through what I'm doing all the time, you know, and learning how to just be here, just be present with what is. And as uncomfortable as that is at first, man, there's a lot of magic in that. That's where all the magic of being a human lives, is right in that moment.
Yeah.
Of being able to be with what is.
Well, like you were describing, there's in that presence, in that moment, you use the word magic. There's something about magic, like when we see a magic trick, or we entertain the magic of the mystery. It's like, it puts us in awe, right? It's like, wow, what is it? And you said when you were describing it, you're like, it's almost, you know, it's there, but you can't really touch it. You can't really explain it. It's beyond ephemeral. And there's a quote, I think you'd love it. It's from Barry Taylor. He said, "God is the name of the blanket we throw over the mystery to give it shape."
Yeah, I love that quote, dude. I got chills.
Yeah, it's really good. And if the only way, really, that if we've experienced or touched that or feel it, is through exactly what you were saying. It's presence. It's not coming in the anxious, racing mind of the future. It's not coming in the shameful, regretful mind of the past. It's only coming in the here and now. And as cliche as it is, the only moment that will ever exist, has always existed, is in the here and now. And I'm pretty convinced that it is the task of a lifetime, because in many ways you are trying to beat the programming of a brain that is designed to be a protection machine, to constantly think and worry about the future by using models of the past. So it's this constant tension of pulling you out of the here and now. So you need whatever it is, these anchors, these memes, this being up and down. I often think, like, am I where my feet are at right now?
Yes.
And so often when I ask myself that question, I'm like, no, my feet are here. I'm standing in the garden. I'm thinking about this thing that's happening a week from now. Why am I doing that? But if life is a practice, and the more we microdose presence, the more it blankets over that mystery that we're talking about. And I'm pretty convinced, I can't think of a use case where being present doesn't make what is in front of you, if not better, more manageable. So I think presence makes mundane moments special. I think it makes special moments a lifelong memory and bliss. And I think it makes good things great and bad things more manageable.
Yes.
And all of that is through presence. And how few people are touching that, even in a moment, over a day. Like, there's a lot of people that aren't, they're doing the human doing thing. They're doing so much stuff. They're living entire lives. They're getting salaries and 401ks, completely asleep almost.
Yeah.
Almost never touching that mystery, never touching that presence, never having that. And that's wild. And I know it's true for many people, because it's mostly me too. And I just so happen to have found tools that have been able to make me aware of this and give me the pull to always try and come back to it. But it's still, it never ends, man. It never stops, you know?
Yeah, that practice is eternal. Can we drop the mics, dude? We got to drop. That was a fucking mic drop, bro. Steve, come on, dude. But something you said has come up for me in observing the culture. You know, we can't game the system. We're all trying to game the system, you know, through modalities, through microdosing, through all sorts of stuff. We're trying to game the system so we can get like an edge on reality, you know, and figure it out and like predetermine where we're going next. But it's impossible because you're still here, dude.
Yeah.
You know, you're still going to have to be in this moment no matter what you do.
Same bad trip for all of us.
You know, another great quote that always comes to my mind, it's from Dune. This fucking quote just like blows my mind, but it's like in a vision, and he's talking to the guy that he ends up having to fight and kill in the first movie. And they're standing in the sand, and he's looking out at the dunes, and the guy goes, "The mystery of life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced." I was like, dude, that's it right there.
Word.
You know, can we just get out of the, like you said, man, just get out of the constantly trying, and our brain, you mentioned this, our brain is designed to figure it out, you know, how, and through practice, can we organize ourselves in a way where we're just present. You know, we're not in that constant monkey mind of trying to figure it out and problem solve, but just experience this moment, the reality that is, because, you know, again, to beat a dead horse, it's a good horse to beat, but
can you surrender to it, right?
Surrender
can you
to
just
the moment, man.
Just let go of this need to have it all figured out, to ponder and sit under the blanket of the mystery and just say, we actually don't know, and that's okay. Because even, you know, there are very smart scientist types that are doing their best to figure this whole thing out.
Yeah.
And even those people, they get to the point where they still need the one mystery, the one miracle, because they'll go all the way back to the Big Bang, and it's like, okay, what happened like just before that? Oh, well, we don't know about that. So like eventually it all comes down to the mystery. However you want to control it. We know so little. It's a desperate attempt to understand and feel some sense of control, because I think it gives us some sense of safety. But there's a certain safety and trust that can come when you do fully surrender too. But it means entertaining and feeling this simultaneous, like what feels like a contradiction, which is our seeming insignificance and our everythingness all at once. There's like this tiny little blip sitting under the stars. And I think we probably used to feel this a lot more because we would just gather around the fire. And you can't not be in awe when there's something about the stillness of the night and the croaking of the frogs and the rustling of the bushes and the crackling of the fire. But we just stopped doing it. You know, we went inside and we switched the fire for the Netflix show, and we stopped pondering the mystery. And we became too heady, too intellectual, too analytical. And a lot of those smarts have done amazing things. They've built technology that is incredible, but we can't escape the mystery. We'll never figure it out, and there's only one way to find out, and that's when we move on. And then we'll go, that's what it was all about.
Fuck.
Far out.
Yeah, man. You got to keep a sense of humor. That's been a big thing for me.
Yes.
It's hard being a human, dude. It's overwhelming. We're navigating infinite thoughts and feelings and energies, and then on top of that, that's just in being every day. And then you've got all this stuff out here. You know, you've got taxes, you've got your job, you've got your family, you've got relationships. It's overwhelming, man, and you gotta keep a really light hold on the steering wheel. Maybe even if you can, just let God steer. You know, take your hands totally off the wheel. That's a really difficult thing because it's fucking scary, man. It's scary. But if you can have a sense of humor about it and you can just have a lightness to it, because, dude, we're not here for that long, man. You know, being super generous, we're here for maybe 100 years. You know, if you're lucky, you know, you're here for, 100 years, give or take. It's a blip, man. It's gone. And then what? You know, we're on to the next thing. We're going to do it all over again. Maybe as a human, maybe as something else. But, you know, it's like just allowing yourself to be in the mystery of it all is a really powerful thing. And go work the job and get the 401k. You know, do it all, man.
Well, that's part of the mystery. It's in it. So
totally.
It's all of it.
Totally.
All is of or nothing is. And this is like the crazy, like, heads and tails nature of life, because I'm very much on the same wavelength as you. Like, don't take yourself too seriously. You're not getting out alive. Like, try to laugh. And then this, like, voice from the back of my head jumps in, and it's like, yeah, but what about all the suffering in the world? What about what's going on in Gaza? What about the nuclear war that's impending? What about politics? And I'm like, yeah, and all that's true. And people will say, like, how can you just, you know, laugh when all of this is happening in the world? And it's like, yeah, well, because I don't know what else to do, number one. Secondarily, to quote the great Duncan Trussell, he's like, somewhere there is some poor phoneless fool sitting underneath a waterfall, completely unaware about how scared and angry he should be about the world. Because we're just not supposed to be also tapped into all of that, dude.
We're not.
We would know, like, what, a 5-mile radius and the 50, you know, homies that we had in the tribe, and whether we were going to eat today. And like looking at the skies to think about what the weather was. We weren't supposed to know what was going on, everywhere in the world, all of the world's worst bits, beam directly into our pocket through this limbic hijack machine that we call a phone. It's fucked. Nobody can handle that, dude.
No, not at all, man. You gotta, and again, to see the positive of it, wonderful technology, wonderful connective technology. And so what can we do with that? We've got to learn, we've got to find balance, because we live in a really special time. The realization of our highest potential has never been more affordable. And with that, we have to cultivate the tools of that responsibility, which is difficult because we've got so much at our fingertips and there's so many distractions. And yet, there's never been a better time to be a fully realized, totally free being in human history.
Mm-hmm.
It's just never been, And so you either get to choose to do that, or you just allow yourself to, I don't know if allowing is quite the right word, but you stay asleep and you just, keep on the misery train of how fucking hard it is to be a human, and you stay in the grind. Because whatever your circumstances are, going back to the money thing, I mean, think about how many guys, a handful, not many, but who have made $1 billion in their life. And to most of us, it's like $1 billion, dude. I'm set. I'm done. But you're a billionaire standing in a room with a bunch of 100 billionaires. You're looking around going, whoa, dude, that guy's got 3 yachts, bro. He's got a house in Mallorca and LA and New York City. Oh, shit, I don't have enough, man. So then, what is it going to take for you to feel like I've got enough? And allowing what you have to be enough, and yet allowing for the ever infinite expansion of your soul.
Yeah.
Which is to not get more, but experience more.
That's right.
Always,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's a dance, man. I think it's a constant dance.
I think men have a hard time with that sometimes because they think that having enough, or this acceptance that to have enough in some sense is to have more than most people will ever have, because you've actually got enough.
Yeah.
And there's these other cliches like happiness is wanting what you already have, and people hear that and they're like, yeah, it sounds cute, but men in particular, I think they have a hard time even entertaining that idea because they believe that it will remove their edge or something like that they can't fully lean to gratitude because it will make them complacent, that they've got to still again, great idea, but no, I'm striving for more. And I think there's a way that you can be content but not complacent, and I think that's really what you're describing here is like, yes, can I make peace with the fact that I have enough right now? In fact, almost everybody listening to this will probably want more and will want to move into higher levels of abundance for their family. But realistically speaking, they almost certainly have enough. They're almost certainly drowning in abundance if they choose to see it. And they can simultaneously accept that and be very content with that without becoming complacent, to know that they can still go for more, whatever that means. And more in the sense of not just the acquisition of things, but the growth process of becoming a more full individual, which brings about more opportunities. And whether that's in the finances, usually it's a reciprocal relationship to nature and the flow of energy. Currency is the flow of energy.
Yes.
And usually why people who have done the work, hopefully the reason they want more money is because it opens up their expansiveness to give more back.
Yeah.
Like some of the most selfish people are some of the most poor people, not because they're bad people, but because they don't have the capacity to think beyond themselves, because on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they're at the bottom. Of course they're selfish.
Yeah.
You should be selfish if you're struggling to survive right now.
Right.
But in culture, like sometimes it's like, oh those billionaires, well, they're selfish because firstly, you don't know. That person could be doing enormous amounts of philanthropy with $1 billion. Does money corrupt some people? Almost certainly. But it's an amplifier.
Yeah.
Those people were going to be corrupt by something anyway. So
exactly.
It's just like, again, that's another one of these clusterfucks of the human experience, which is like simultaneous things can coexist and they can seem contradictory. But they when you sit with them, you're like, oh yeah, they're kind of both true at the same time.
Yeah. No doubt, dude. A lot is true at the same time.
Yeah. So on this journey, because I really do think that most people want to evolve. I think it's like our soul's calling to want to evolve, to want to grow, to want to actualize our highest self. And like you've alluded to, we need guides along the way. We need mentors. We need wayfinders, people that have walked the path before us that can say, I can teach you some stuff here, which is amazing. And I wouldn't be anywhere close to where I'm at without some incredibly influential mentors along the way. Some that I've just found through podcasts, some that I've known in person, and some great friendships like yourself. And with that comes the potential for some fuckery, because mentors can be commodified. They can act in the shadows a little bit. They can sell enlightenment. They can sell the path. They might not necessarily be virtuous, but they might talk a big game. And I love Austin. I love coming here. It's a very special place, but there's a little bit of that chicanery going on too, right? There's a lot of these healers or the spiritual community. And in certain places, there seems to be a congregation of them. What should people be watching out for to make sure that the people that they are listening to are in integrity and are leading them down a right path, that are not, using the shadow side of talking a good game just to exploit other people?
It can be very difficult to assess and diagnose when that's going on, especially when you're in a place of, needing help or feeling like you need help, you need guidance. And only through receiving that guidance, putting it into action, and then being very tuned into the dynamic of the relationship, can you really start to see the truth of who people are? And that requires that critical thinking element, that ability to kill your masters. Buddha said something like, if you see me walking down the street, you should kill me.
Yes. And I think one of his last dying wishes was, don't make statues of me. And now the world is full of statues of the Buddha, right?
I know. So I think I've had that myself, where I've had these idols that I've met. Don't meet your idol, dude.
Yeah.
Don't meet your idol.
Some truth in that.
Yeah, because inevitably they're going to show you that they're just a human being.
Yeah.
They're just another human being. And so, again, you have to walk your own path. You have to decide and discern what's right for you, what's truth for you, what's integrous and authentic for you in your own journey. Take what you will, take what you will and leave the rest. I mean, I've had a few idols who I was hopeful they would be mentors, and through interactions, through the development of our relationship, I came to see, holy shit, this dude is a parasite. And for me, what that always came down to, the red flag that seemed to be the common thread between any and all of these individuals, is anytime they're telling you this is the way, or you are not enough unless, or there's that insinuation that you're not good enough or you're not part of the cool kids club unless you do this, that's a big red flag. Because a true mentor or teacher is going to give you some information, maybe even give you some practices, some tools, just point blank. But they're never going to suggest that you are not worthy or not totally perfect as you are unless you come with me, unless you do this thing. And, it's happened throughout history,
Yeah.
The gurus,
The guru complex.
inevitably either end up taking advantage of people or taking advantage of their position and what that brings to them.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen it with like all of the yoga gurus.
Yeah.
They've all been exiled or made documentaries out of them about,
It's very funny, right? Because like, again, almost certainly their heart was pure. They wanted to help, but at a certain point, this absolute power corrupts absolutely. And it just like, it snuck in through a little blind spot. And all of a sudden you've got Bikram saying, I'll open your 8th chakra if you just give me a blowjob. That's how you become enlightened.
Well,
you need the seed.
And this is the thing, dude, because they're all just humans.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
not
just
gods.
a man.
They play gods.
That's just a man who's susceptible like all of us. That's fallible. That's, taking advantage of an opportunity to get some pleasure, And so I think that we all have to be willing to kill our masters at some point, not physically, not literally, of course.
And to that point, maybe even kill the master that we believe is our own self. Maybe we got a little too high on our own supply sometimes.
Absolutely.
Because I think that's happening in spiritual circles too. Like people.
Well, we can bring up the specific example.
Well, I mean, the recent example in the spiritual community is the kind of laughable clips going around of Aubrey Marcus saying that the divine feminine spirit Isis spoke to him, and in this divine download that he received on his 699th ayahuasca ceremony, that he was told to go on Raya to find another beautiful woman, that he has been the chosen one, that he must impregnate 2 of these ladies. And that was, that was spoken. And you maybe think when you hear something like that, the God that was speaking to him might just be his dick, that he has become to believe that he's so tapped in. And again, to Aubrey, I think he's done an enormous amount of good, mostly. He's lots of good for a lot of people.
Man, for sure.
But maybe it just goes a step too far sometimes. And I don't think when he put that out, it was received remotely like he thought it was going to be received. I think he thought people were going to be like, wow, you're so evolved, Aubrey. This is amazing. But most people see it for what it is this time. And it was like, what are you doing, bro?
Yeah.
What are you doing, bro?
Yeah. I saw the clip and I thought, and the clip I saw was a pretty ingenious skit that was kind of created. This guy, Nick.
I know the one.
Nick Sway. And he was like the Department of Elimination of Organic.
Yeah.
It was pretty genius. And it's like basically this demonic force like whispering into Aubrey's ear, like, yeah, you think this is God.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And, I have a ton of respect for Aubrey and everything he's done. I mean, early on in my journey, I was all about all his podcasts until, he started talking about some of the really heavy polygamy stuff and polyamory stuff. And I was like, I don't, it just doesn't resonate with me, like being in a room and listening to your wife get fucked by some guy in the other room and you're battling those demons. I'm like, what are we doing here, dude?
Yeah.
Like, is that actually fruitful in your spiritual growth? I'm not sure. And so I kind of got tuned out of it. And then I've kind of like through the grapevine, watched the journey of like coming out of polyamory and going into monogamy, or what he calls does he call it radical monogamy, or what is this term?
They just invented this term because Aubrey was famously very much about that lifestyle, and even somewhat the cult of the Onnit tribe a little bit. A lot of them tried it, and a lot of them ended up saying actually the open relationship kind of thing was really, really difficult. Now they packaged it as spiritual evolution, right? Taught them to face their shadows. But even Aubrey, the king of the hill, was like, actually got what I needed from that, and now I'm entering into a beautiful relationship with my wife Vailana, and it's going to be monogamous, and we're going to do like the boring, good old-fashioned way of monogamy until
he got the download from ISIS.
He got the download from ISIS, which could be maybe just like some sexual diva. Like I think most people would just be like more receptive to the message if he was like, I'm just a guy that likes to fuck. And that's why I probably went into there. But now I'm trying to package it as a divine download from God.
So that's really what I wanted to say, because I think it takes an immense amount of courage to get on a microphone and share your process.
No doubt.
Especially
with people you're intimate with and close with.
Yeah. And say things that come up in your psyche, that you feel in your heart, and you're working on discerning God's voice, spirit, my own ego, my own shit, and you're putting that out there for the world. I think it takes an immense amount of courage and inner fortitude to do that. Then, though, my question becomes, the fact that you can't see this from another angle and go, okay, so Spirit is giving me a download to go and impregnate 2 women, outside of my marriage. Okay, maybe that's a download, but whether it is or it isn't doesn't really matter, because it's about his experience, But to share that and then think it's going to be received in a certain way and not realize like people are going to look at you like a total narcissistic maniac.
Yeah.
Which maybe that's true too. Certainly seems questionable that you would just start packaging that as spiritual evolution.
Right.
So
while selling romantic relationship workshops, and I think that's why people also get a little bit more triggered by that stuff, is like people were in the comments saying like, I was at your workshop last year where you were talking about ways to love in a monogamous relationship. Now all of this is going on, and what's the next grift essentially? Now what's the next sale of like, this is how you can become as enlightened as I am, because monogamy is only for the 3D people that don't get it. Now you need radical monogamy if you're truly going to ascend. And you can attend my workshop for $10,000 over the weekend if you want to come and do that. And I'll show you exactly how. It's kind of just like, it gives people the ick, for want of a better word.
Yeah. And so him just being a great example of a lot of people are out. We live in an age of commercialization of spirituality and wellness.
Yeah.
And so again, man, you cannot just decide that somebody is your idol and everything they say is gospel, because it's just, they're another human being.
Exactly.
They're another person who's, stumbling and bumbling their way through life in a human body. And, it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
You have to decide what's right for you, and you can't base that on what some talking head on Instagram is doing.
Yeah.
No matter what it is. I saw it and I laughed, and then I go through the comments, or I don't think he even had it posted, but he had posted all the names that people were calling him, and how upsetting it was and all this. And it's like, dude, you had to see that coming, man.
Yeah.
If you're this aware, how do you not understand that this is going to be received in a certain way?
Yeah.
And again, more power to him for having the balls to say this stuff,
right?
And talk about his process of what's going on inside of him, because I think that, to me, that's where the fruit lies of it, is when you take something that far, you expand the scope, the breadth of which people can start to observe their own internal mechanism more clearly, and go, oh, okay, and allow for that. And then, in my own experience, it's like, this thing requires discernment too.
Yes. Big time.
Of course, dude. I took evolutionary biology in college, one of my favorite classes of all time. Yeah. Men are programmed physiologically, biologically to spread our seed. Mm-hmm. It's part of nature's process of proliferating the human race. But does that mean it's spiritually it's a spiritually ascended position to take, to say I need to just impregnate as many women as possible?
Yeah.
Actually, not really.
No.
Not for me at least.
No.
You
got to just call it what it is. And I think people would more respect that than the attempt to package it as something that is enlightened. And I think the reason that some people will get duped, by the way, some people have always been duped by people. They've ended up in cults. There's many documentaries where people will talk about how they got swept up in the feather of a cult and it was amazing. And then only after they escaped were they like, oh yeah, wow, there were a lot of red flags. So like this discernment piece that you said is really important, because I think people can recognize whether they are being manipulated or grifted if they are in right relationship to themselves.
Yeah.
There's this word that gets thrown around a lot called authenticity. Like you can smell authenticity, but only if you are authentic within yourself.
100%.
Like if you're lying to yourself, you are prone to be manipulated or lied to by people that are good at talking and saying the right set of words to cast the right spells. Because Aubrey's masterful at that. He's poetic. The words he uses all the right spiritual things. He looks the part. He wears the beads. He wears the cloaks. He says the right things. And the people that want so badly to belong to something, and they see the value in that, because there's good in the spiritual community, man. Again, there's good in what Aubrey's done.
Yeah.
So they get suckered wholesale instead of being like, well, I've got this discernment to say that we can divorce the message from the messenger. Like Kanye West is a good example, because everyone's like, Kanye West has gone off the deep end. I'll still slap to some old Kanye West songs, man. They smack, but some people want to throw all the baby out with the bathwater because Kanye's a madman or whatever. But you don't need to love the artist to love the message, you know. And I think it's only if you have that discernment you can do that, and that's why it's dangerous. And I think that's why people are coming out in droves and pushing back on this a little bit, because they know there are some people that are going to get swept up in this. There are some people that are going to, paint this community in a bad light, and it doesn't help our case to steel man that there is utility in alternative practices that are not mainstream Christianity, for example. There's immense value in certain plant medicines at the right time, but then people see it getting taken to extreme and they think, well, that's what that leads to. You guys go and enjoy your ayahuasca, and 2 years down the line you're going to be trying to fuck everything and call it radical monogamy. It's like, no, maybe they just did too much. Maybe there's actually such a thing as too much plant medicine. Maybe when you've got the message, you can hang up the phone, as Terrence McKenna used to say.
Absolutely, man. You got to be willing to do that. You've got to be willing to do that. The message that rings true always for me, the only thing I have left to say, overarching, the only message I have to share is, man, follow your inner guide. Follow your instincts, follow your intuition, because that is the only thing that matters. Whatever's going on out here, there's a lot of crazy shit, dude. There's a lot of crazy shit. And, to your point of the cult of Aubrey, there's tons of people in the comments going, you're so amazing.
Of course.
Still.
Of course.
And, so it's just, the only thing you have to follow is your inner sense. And how you get right with that is a moment by moment practice. You know, it doesn't happen overnight. You're going to fuck shit up along the way. And the only way you really learn how to play the game is being on the field, so you follow that inner instinct. Take the action, do the thing, see what happens.
Take the L's.
Yeah. You're going to have to.
Get your licks.
Again, there's no way to game the system, dude.
No.
You can't circumnavigate your way around experience and loss and fuck-ups.
Yeah.
You have to have the experience to go, oh, well, you know what? That didn't work.
Yeah, the kids say these days, fuck around and find out.
Yeah, bro.
The only way out is through. You've got to do it. And
That's it.
Some shit's going to work and some shit is going to suck.
Hey, man, we'll see what happens when you get these two chicks impregnated. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. It might be great,
bro.
They might be great.
Great.
Yeah.
Maybe your whole life falls apart.
Yeah.
But hey, you tried it.
Yeah.
You followed that inner sense, you followed the download. But that's the only way. It's the only way it's ever happened for me. I can't have somebody tell me how it goes. and just take their word as gospel.
That's right, yeah.
Whether it's been great advice, great wisdom or not, like I have to find out for myself.
Yeah.
That's
It's
the only way it's
experiential.
ever settled into my bones and my cells, you know, is to just do it. Get on the field, do it.
The man in the arena.
Yeah.
Like
Say
life
the
is,
thing, do the thing, see what happens. Oh, okay, that pissed people off. Oh, all right. Well, is there disturbance of what I did or said? Is that a reflection on the truth or authenticity of what I'm expressing? Maybe, maybe not. Again, more discerning to be done, you know, because there's a lot of truths that need to be said in this current day and age that a lot of people are afraid to say.
That's right.
You know, especially talking about like, you know, what we all experienced coming through the COVID portal and getting to stand in that and going, well, okay, sometimes you say a truth that unequivocally in my heart and soul, that is true. But a lot of people are pissed off about that.
Oh, yeah.
Can I stand in that, or was I wrong? Well, maybe I was actually right. I feel totally in truth in that.
Yeah. Can you be at peace with it even if you're getting the arrows? You know, even in those times, for example, like you got to really admire the people that stood for their truth and spoke it even when everything was at stake for them. Jobs were at stake, careers, relationships, like public figures that had reputations to lose, the cancel culture, the eradication from the internet, and they still stood in their truth. And you know, there's something very admirable about that.
Absolutely, man. And it's not always easy. So
no, absolutely not.
It's a fire, man. It's a fire of purification. And, you know, the only way you can know whether or not it's true is by getting on the field and playing ball, man.
Well, I wanna, you know, spend the last little bit of this conversation building on that you just said, which is you got to play the game. You got to get your knees dirty and you got to do the thing. The only way to really figure out where to start doing the thing is listen to your inner sense, your intuition, your guidance, to trust that this gut feeling is steering you in the right direction. And that some people are incredibly disconnected from that the instrument isn't very finely tuned. And there are practices that can tune it. Like you said, it's a moment to moment, day by day. Presence is very important on that. But I wanted to talk to you in relation to that, this concept of sobriety. You've been sharing some interesting thoughts about this, because to be sober means to be clean, right? To be clear, to have a better connection to that. And I think there's a lot of people in the world that say they're sober because we think it's only about booze. I don't drink, so I'm sober. But meanwhile, they're smoking weed every day, or they're drinking Be-Free, or they're smashing Kratom, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm sober. These are plants. These are safe. Like, what's your take on sobriety?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I was asked that on another pod a few months ago, and a guy said, you know, can you smoke weed and call yourself sober? And my initial response was no. And by the written, maybe not written, by the agreed to guidelines of the 12-step programs, you know, an individual can intake caffeine and nicotine and call themselves sober.
Okay.
You know?
I'm set. Let's go.
Yeah. And even that, everybody, I think that clip got posted and everybody's like, nicotine and caffeine are drugs.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, you're right. You're totally right. So then what is our definition of sobriety?
Right.
That's really what the question is. So for me, it's, again, dude, such an internal process, such an internal experience. What are you using this stuff for? And do you find yourself in a position of using things to escape the moment, escape yourself? You can use a lot of things, man. You can use work. You can use porn. You can use substances, alcohol.
I've used them all. Healthy things too.
Totally.
You can use exercise.
Absolutely.
You can do all kinds of things to avoid being with yourself.
Anything. So I think that, you know, for me, what sobriety comes down to is, am I able to be with myself in any form that myself seems to take moment by moment and be totally good with that without having to do anything, take anything to be something else? And, you know, some of the greatest thinkers of all time were alcoholics, or what we would maybe call drug addicts. I mean, you know, so some of the most influential philosophers in the history of humanity have been users of all sorts of things, you know? And so I don't necessarily think it's about any substance. It's about your relationship to the substances. And so what that comes down to is you having a really good and hard look at yourself and saying, what am I using this for? What is this doing for me? Is there a purpose behind it? Is it something I'm using just every day to do, to get through the meeting, to get through the stuff, to be able to be at the family dinner? Or is it something that elevates my experience in some way?
Yeah.
You know, because I'm a huge fan of plant medicine in all its forms, you know, from the big dogs, ayahuasca and psilocybin and LSD, to cannabis and, you know, kratom at times, and kava, and things that have been really beneficial for me at various points in my life. You know, the problem for me came when the usage of it no longer fit the circumstance. You know, for instance, during my football career, cannabis was super important because I was dealing with a lot of pain, and I'd recognized that opiates were fucking totally detrimental to my healing and my state of being. So cannabis was incredibly important for managing pain and reducing mental and emotional stress during my playing career. Was it that important 10 years later when, you know, I'm just trying to live and build a new identity and figure out who I am and what my purpose is in this life? Not really. You know, and when that became obviously clear, beyond obviously clear, and I had fought it tooth and nail because part of my identity had become about cannabis as medicine for athletes. That was one of the things I did when I came out of football, speaking about cannabis as a neuroprotectant, and dealing with concussions and as an alternative to opiates. So part of my identity had been swept up in cannabis use. But then I started going, what am I doing this for? This is just this is projecting me into the cosmos where I'm having this not fun out-of-body experience, and I have to spend the next 2 hours bringing myself back down to earth. And meanwhile, I'm in a fucking tornado of chaos and panic. Is that really serving me today? Not really.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, okay, yeah, I can do breath work and get in my ice tub to bring it back into balance, but do I want to just be doing that stuff just to combat this, you know, ill-begotten side effect of this thing that I thought I had to do, you know, just to function? So I think it's, you know, sobriety really comes down to, are you blocking your connection to yourself? Or are you doing things? Because I think it's really important that no matter what we do, we have a baseline of connection to self that we always can come back to. And if you're using things daily, on a daily basis, like I haven't smoked cannabis in now like 7 or 8 months. And that's been really important for me. I haven't used kratom in like 6 months. Been really important for me. And so for me, it came down to just constantly blocking the channel of self connected to higher self, spirit, intuition, and always and attempting to make that connection about a sense that was really just a alternate state of consciousness, which was really a high, if that makes sense.
It does. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's everybody's choice. You know, I want to be very clear. I don't think that you need to stop smoking weed to be the person you're destined to be. If you feel like cannabis is important to you, do it. I don't think you need to be sober to be the person you need to be, sober on alcohol. You know, I think that it comes down to you.
Yeah.
And you, if you're already asking the questions, you've already come into awareness of like, oh, when I drink, this happens. Or I move into this mode of being. The next day, I'm a little more irritable. I've got a little less capacity to be with people and myself. Well, you're starting to ask the question, so maybe there's something there.
Yeah.
And again, it's up to you.
Explore it.
It's totally an individualistic path, you know, that can only be navigated by you. Because if I tell you to go and get sober, you go and get sober and you're just pissed off about it. That's not really doing any good either.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it has to come down to what is your relationship with it? You know, it's not even about the substance. Again, that was one thing I learned. I mean, I went to a treatment center at the end of last year, dude, in October. I spent 30 days in a treatment center. And it was some of the most important, it was maybe the most important 30 days of my life, because I realized going in there, I had not had a totally sober day free of anything for probably 20 years, you know? And that came down to, I had an incapacity. I was incapable of being with myself. What a revelation.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and then to learn how to be with myself was uncomfortable as fuck, and the most important work I've ever done on myself.
That's usually how it goes, right?
Yeah.
Fuck.
You know, and with that, you really start to cultivate strength that is incalculable in how you can navigate the world in your life. Because as long as you're leaning on something, you can never really know your highest potential. You know, you just can't. It's impossible. So that's my thoughts on it. And I think that, you know, it comes down to the individual. And if you're asking questions, if you're already aware of the things that are going on, then there's something to be explored there. And if not, it's going to take you there at some point or another. You know, these things, as we've said many times, they have a deep intelligence. You know, there's a consciousness to all of these things. And they're going to take you right to where you need to be. Maybe not in this lifetime, but at some point or another, because it's all really, you know, there's a lot of, I mean, we could talk about this for days, man, but there's so much cultural, like, think about how many people are just living in the cultural story of, I need alcohol to handle life.
Right, right.
You know?
Right.
So if that's just ingrained in your psyche to the point where you're not even really aware of that story, you're just going to use it. You know, you're just going to use it because that's how it is.
Yeah.
You know, it was a tough day. Glass of wine, maybe a bottle of wine, you know. It was a hard day, man. I had a hard day, you know. And no judgment at all. Fuck no judge. I gotta, like, I want to be crystal clear. You know, I've had in this men's group that I have, I've had a really important clarity come through of being crystal clear with the words that I'm using and understanding that words cast spells, as you said. And I have zero judgment for anyone who uses anything for any purpose whatsoever. There's zero judgment. From my experience, it just comes down to where is your awareness at and what is coming up for you in the using of the thing.
Yeah.
Is there some tension there, or does it feel totally good and free? That can only be answered by you.
Well said. Well said, brother. And I think, yeah, to your point a couple of minutes ago, it's up to the individual. Like, don't outsource your locus of authority to anybody, any influencer. Kill your guru. Don't outsource your locus of authority to a substance either. Just like really take back that control and sit with it. And I think a lot of it just comes down to intention. You know, the intention, if you're using it to numb and check out, it's a drug. If you're using it to connect and heal and integrate and enhance, it can be a medicine. The dose makes the poison. Yep. That's all at the hands and the feet of the user. And I think we could do this. We could do this many, many more hours, and we will do it again. But we got to wrap this one up, brother.
Do we?
Yeah, we do. We got another one coming in.
All right, brother.
Where can people go? Keep up.
Everything's on Instagram, man. You want to get in touch, you could hit the link in my bio on Instagram at EDS Britton. All the good stuff's there, dude.
Dude, I appreciate you, bro. Yeah. I always have fun dropping in with you.
Me too, man. Thank you.
We'll see you a lot next week. We'll see Eben back on the podcast in the future. Peace out. All right, friends. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps us spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.